Well, a law passed in 1991 placed sustainable development at the heart of its law. The Resource Management Act was intended to govern land use, resource development and environmental protection, focusing on a range of environment bottom lines and a desire to control the adverse environmental effects of human activity. And joining us now from Federated Farmers is Vice President Karen Williams to break down the RMA reform of Minister David Parker and what these two new regulations mean. Welcome to the program, Karen.
Good evening, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
A whopping 531-page report, a long night's read.
Probably more than one for a few of us, but yeah, comprehensive, no doubt.
Yeah, and you've got an extensive policy team there at Federated Farmers that do some great work in summarising a lot of it for you. What were some of the key points that stood out straight away that firstly was a positive?
Yeah, sure. Look, there's no, I think there's been so much frustration with this piece of legislation by a mixed amount of people. So, it's not only developers, it's submitters, environmentalists. Some of the outcomes have been really perplexing. So Federated Farmers certainly recognise that, it's time for a major overhaul. It's nearly 30 years old and we need to look at that. But in saying that, though, the concept of sustainable management and protecting our natural and physical resources is still really sound. And when you look at protecting environmental bottom lines and then look at economic, social, cultural and environmental well-beings on top of that, then that part of the Act is still really solid. So we'll sort of go with that. Some of the frustrations, I guess, have always been that the length of time through some of these consent processes have taken and desiring really good outcomes like with wetland development or on-farm storage, water storage, when we're looking at climate change and needing to be more resilient. Those have been really problematic processes. And also the length of time with plan development. It's of our local regional plan. I first started going to meetings on that in 2013, and I have colleagues who are now in Environment Court mediation, same plan, still going. And look, that's exhausting. It's exhausting for people, communities, and so resource hungry. So totally recognise we need to do better.
It's interesting. Sorry, that was interesting. It is interesting that Environment Minister David Parker has said that the RMA reform has been a handbrake on economic growth, and yet at the same time, the Ministry for Environment is certainly pushing for the environment above all else in a lot of other ways as well. How do you believe the separation into two parts of legislation, pieces of legislation, a Natural and Built Environments Act and a Strategic Planning Act, the split, is going to find that balance of our economic and environment?
Yeah, it'll be challenging. I mean, obviously it's been challenging with the one act, but now we'll have two, so that adds a bit of complexity. It also gives question to what weighting will be given to either of those, and how will that be decided? Will that be decided politically or through the courts with, waiting for more and more case law? So really challenging in that space. Look, in saying that though, we need to look after our environment and protect our environmental bottom lines, but we also need enabling legislation that enables us to do things on our land, and that that in our space, obviously that provides food for us, but it also drives a strong economy, which keeps our people employed and maintains a well-being. So look, Sarah, it's a really delicate balance, and both are key, and both will need solid weighting.
I've just got so many examples in my head where I'll be like, so where would this stand now? Like the Ruataniwha Dam, the Waikato River with Auckland's water supply. There's just so many examples of it. And there's a new Managed Retreat and Climate Change Adaptation Act. This is talking about sea level rise, but of course, urban development legislation and as you said before, water storage. Does this new split legislation give a pathway for us to adapt quicker to these things?
Well, certainly would hope so. With looking at even like the work we're doing with He Waka Eke Noa and our climate change partnership between government, Māori and industry, it's looking at it about reducing our emissions, but it's also about our adaptation and how we can, farm in a changing environment with less rain or more rain, more extreme events, etc. So I really hope that this legislation will be enabling of that and supportive of us making change.
And of course, the local and regional councils are very much a part of the leader of the law of the Resource Management Act on a daily basis, as well as, of course, the planners and surveyors that support these cases. What was it that you took out of it that will support them, with their very low funding that they do have to support seeing out this act?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's challenging, particularly some of the smaller councils. And here in Carterton, we've got, one of the smaller district councils and a requirement, to prepare a plan now under potentially a different regime. They're cash strapped. COVID has hit hard, particularly in some areas with hospitality and tourism industry. And can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, sorry, it looked like it's glitching. So look, it's a burden for them, and it's not just a resource burden, it's also getting the right capability and staffing. And we'll need to make sure our tertiary institutions are well set up for this to bring through the kind of capability and expertise we're going to need to assist with a new planning regime.
So where to from here around timeframes for this new legislation to come into effect?
Look, it's still a recommendation, so it's not in a framework yet. We've had three sort of things going on under the RMA simultaneously. So there's been some recent amendments to the Act. There's been this review of the Act and how it's functioning, and also there's been some regulations to do with the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water, the National Environmental Standards, and the stock regulations. So those are all sort of related but distinctly different too. So it's been slightly confusing for people, but we'll just wait and see. We've had the report publicly released, and no doubt MFE will continue working on this. And we'll probably, I'm speculating, we might see a bit more action post-election.
Yeah, absolutely. And saying it's not a Labour Party policy yet, but Parker indicated that they would be seeking to put the new regime in within 3 years. Karen, Vice President of Federated Farmers, thank you so much for taking the time to join us to discuss the RMA reforms. Before you go, on a real side note, because that's what we do on Serious Country, I've got a whole heap of people coming in here. You probably may not have heard at the start of the show, and I was hoping to get a lot of comments, and I've just seen them all pour in. If you were to go to a hologram music concert of anyone dead or alive, I'm just trying to suss out your music taste, who would it be?
Quite like Nat King Cole, actually. That's a bit of a flip back to sort of quite, old time. Yeah. I think, I'd go back to that era.
I can just see you there, Pinot, record on, Nat King Cole. Very classy.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's Karen Williams, Vice President of Federated Farmers.
This is Sarah's Country.